session. It's all about photo management, photo organizing, and I'll try to answer all your questions. It doesn't matter whether you work on a Windows computer or on a Mac, whether you want to use the cloud or not, whether you're Android or iPhone. This is really for everybody. And it also doesn't only have to be digital photos, it can absolutely be about printed photos. So if you do have any questions, photo related questions, go ahead and type them into the comment section there. I will start out with a few questions that I have received previously through people messaging me, and I will start with one that I hear time and time again from people with iPhones who also use their no, that they don't even have to be using the cloud, actually, just even within the iPhone. So the question is that somebody created albums on their iPhone. You can do the exact same thing on a Mac, so it's the same. Doesn't matter where you work. So on the iPhone, she created albums, sort of, maybe of an event or something, and had all these albums, and then got confused because she thought, okay, I'm gonna delete this from the feed now, from the all photos, because I've got it in the album and that's my structure I want. However, it disappeared, which is normal. That's what it does, because the reason for that is you take a photo, it goes into camera roll, and that's what you see when you click on all photos. And you can put a photo in one album, in 10 albums, it doesn't matter. When you put it in an album is not I shouldn't say it's not real, it is real, but it is a virtual album. It doesn't make a copy of your photo. Imagine that it creates a link to your original photo, and your original photo sits in all photos. That's your camera roll, and it is linked to that. So of course it then makes sense that when you delete the photo from an album or from the camera roll, it will actually be gone everywhere. So you can remove a photo from an album without deleting the original. That means it will disappear from the album, but it will still be in the camera roll. However, when you delete a photo, it's going to be gone everywhere. So you can't get rid of photos from the camera roll by organizing and moving them into albums. That's not gonna work like that, unfortunately. It's just getting used to the view, I suppose, and that's just the way it is. We can't do anything about it. So that's that question. I hope I was able to answer that about the iPhone and albums, how they connect to the camera roll, to the feed. And then I've got another question from Deb, and she has done so much work. She's awesome. I can't see whether you're online, Deb. If you are, hello. Thanks for joining me. So it was a question about redating and renaming photos. Now let's start with redating a photo. So obviously when you take a photo with a digital camera, be it your phone or your good camera, it will add and embed in the file the capture date, which is great, unless your camera's got the wrong time. So that might be a case where we actually have to change and adjust the date. Where that happens too is, of course, with scan. So if you scan printed photos, they will have the day of the scanning, which is, of course, the wrong date. So you don't have to do that, but I do recommend, if you can and if you've got the time, do redate the photos, even if it's just an approximate date, because then it will just slot into the right time chronologically, and that's what most programs do. Automatically they go by date. So if you do scan photos, all of a sudden they pop up, in 2018, 1920, and that's not really where they belong. So if you can redate them, even if it's just a default date, the 1st of the 1st 1900, which is obviously also a totally wrong date, but it will at least slot them in before your digital prints. And then later, if you've got maybe more time, you can always go back, and if you know a more approximate date or a more closer date to reality, you can change that. Now, how do you do that? This is something you do on your computer, and you can do that easily on Windows or Mac, doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to start with Windows. If you want to change the date of a photo, what you do is you can do that in the Explorer. You select your file, and when you right click, you get to Properties, and in the Details pane there you can adjust the capture date. So in Windows they call it date taken. That's what you want to change, and you can also do that in batches. So you could select a whole list of photos and change their dates all at once. You don't have to do one by one and go through like thousands of photos. So that's one way to do it. Of course, you could also use software that helps you do that. One that comes to mind is no, hold on, that's actually to rename them, not to redate them. So on Windows, in the Explorer, that's totally fine. You can of course also do that if you use software like Adobe Lightroom or Bridge, or possibly other photo management systems that you might be using. You can do that. If you're on Windows and you use the native Photos app that comes with every Windows computer these days, you cannot change the date in there. This is really a very basic program, so you can't do it there. You'd have to do it in the Explorer or another software. Now on the Mac, that's where it gets a little bit confusing. So when you work in Photos on the Mac within the app, it's really easy to adjust the date. You select the photos, and in the menus, I can't tell you from the top of my head, I think it's just in the top menu there you see photos, I think, and somewhere you will find adjust date, and that's where you go and you can adjust the date. I use that quite a lot when, even though I try that it's not happening and plan for it, but when we travel I regularly forget to change the time on the good camera, and then I've got the wrong time and I adjust it later like that. That works fine in the Photos app. In the Mac Finder, it's really confusing because you can actually not see the date the capture date. What it shows you is the date created, and this is a different information. That's not the date the photo was taken, that is the date when the photo was added to your Mac, and it can become really confusing. So on a Mac I don't recommend working in the Finder, it's just too hard. What I recommend there is to use a free software like Adobe Bridge, and you can do all these things and you can adjust the dates there. Or again, Adobe Lightroom, of course, that's the top one, that works a treat. That's really easy to adjust dates. Now we've got the right date, and I would do that first before I rename files. Reason being, if you use an automatic renamer program, you can automatically say, okay, I want to rename my file using the reverse date, so year, month, day. And if that information is correct in your file, if that capture date is right, of course you can save heaps of time like that and use an automated workflow to rename the files. But first you need to adjust the date, because otherwise you will have the wrong date in your file name as well, and you don't want that. So with renaming, there's different ways. You can, again, I'll start with Windows. You can either work from the Explorer you can simply click onto a file and overwrite the existing name. As you can imagine, this is very, very tedious, and you don't want to do one by one. For that reason, I do highly recommend to use and learn a free software called Adobe Bridge, or another one that's really, really good and easy to use is the hold on, let me check. The advanced renamer. That's a good software. I think it's even free, or maybe they ask for a little donation if you use it. I use that constantly on Windows, advanced renamer, and that makes it a lot easier for you to work in batches and to rename your files. Now, how do you rename them? That's the other question, of course. So it's really best practice to, if you can, to first have the date, so year, month, day, and the reason it's in reverse order is that it will sort chronologically when you sort alphabetically. You don't want to start with the day, you want to start with the year. And after that, it's pretty straightforward too. So what is often recommended is the when, so that's the date, then the who's in the photo, where is it, and why. So maybe why or what, what was it, a birthday or a Christmas or a holiday. So to add that information into the file name, and you can it is limited in length, so you don't want file names that long. Try to keep them as short as possible, but so that it gives you the information that you want. If you do want to go through that process to rename, I do personally, but a lot of people don't, because it tends to be time consuming. But what I highly recommend before you start, to sit down and have a think, so that you can be consistent and write down your naming convention. Just in, I keep going back to the photo logbook where you make all your notes that are photo related. I would write down your naming conventions, and not every single file does need the same convention. In my personal collection, for example, I use a slightly different naming conventions for my family scans and for my digital photos that come into the collection. They slightly different, and for me it makes total sense. So it needs to be making sense to you. But again, date, reverse date, that's the when, what, who, and where. If you can add that information, that's great. I will put the links in the comments afterwards to these apps that I recommend to use, so that your life becomes a little bit easier. Now again, we've talked about the Windows. If you're on a Mac, it's pretty much the same. Let's start with Photos app again. So if you are on a Mac and within the Photos app, you cannot rename your files, unfortunately. Once they're in Photos, they're in, you can't rename them. What you can do though is you could add a title, and it's not quite the same, but it's better than nothing maybe. So another option is you could still use Photos, the Photos app, but you bring in your photos after you have added all the metadata and changed the names and adjusted dates, and then you bring them into Photos, because then it will maintain and keep the file name that you gave it beforehand. But you would have to do that on a different app. You can't do that once they're in Photos, they're in, you can't touch the file name. So how do you do that outside of Photos? Again, Adobe Bridge, Adobe Lightroom, they're really, really great. Another good one, and I think it might even be free, it's called the Name Changer, for Mac only, that is. Name Changer, I really like this little app. You can use it to rename files in batches. It's very easy to use, very straightforward. Check it out, have a look, and see whether that's something you could use. Just wanted to add something now, I forgot. Yeah, no, that's probably, maybe it'll come back to me. So, yeah, so this is the redating photos and renaming photos. Do the redating first so that when you then rename, you can grab that capture date and include it in your file name automatically. Right, so I hope that answers the question. I know it sounds like, oh hell, that's complicated. It's actually not that complicated. Check the different tools out, have a little play with it, decide which one you want to use, what suits you best, decide on a naming convention, and stick to that, and work your way through. That's, you know, how you do it. Right, so I had another question coming through, and that was a bit more general, maybe about sharing photos. How can you share photos? Now, this can be a bit tricky because especially in a family environment, and especially with when you might have teenage kids that might have their own phones, so they take photos too. So you might have photos from not only two, but maybe three, four, even more sources that you sort of want to have in one hub. That's still the aim, to have a family hub. But of course, each person can also have their individual hub if they want, and you exchange photos between you. Now, how to share? So if you do decide, okay, we've got a family hub, that's in my own case, that's how we operate too. We've got the main family hub. My husband's got sort of a bit of his own little hub going, but he only uses that to sort of play around because he likes to test things with Photoshop and stuff like that. So he doesn't really curate his hub. It's just for play. And I curate the family hub, and that's what we want to share. So how can I make sure that the other family members have access to that? Now, there's two different things. I don't want them necessarily to have access to the master hub, because if they mess anything up, it's going to be tricky to fix. So there is a risk with that. You want one person being responsible for that family hub. Now, with sharing, that depends a lot on what you're using. Obviously, that's where the cloud comes in and can make it really easy to share. So let's say you have your photo hub on your C drive on your Windows computer, okay, in the picture folder, and you've got your hub there by year and months, whatever structure you use. What you could do, and these things can sometimes also be automated using different apps. So what you could do, you could, for example, use Amazon Photos, or Amazon Drive, I should say, and have that watch that picture folder, and if you make changes or you add new photos, it will upload them to the cloud. And you could use one joint account, so all your family members could sign in with the same login if need to be. You can share otherwise too, but that's what I've used in the past, and tested out too, so that you have one cloud account somewhere, and all the photos from your hub, they are being sent there. So it's not synchronizing as such, it's just sending them up to the cloud, and other people can then see them and maybe have access to the hub is the wrong word, because they cannot actually change anything. They can change something in the cloud. So let's say if they are on Amazon, they could delete photos there if they've got the login and all the rights. But it's not going to delete the photos on your C drive, because it's only sending them up. So apart from sharing, of course, that's like an additional backup as well. And I have set up clients using a similar system with OneDrive. You can use, um, and if you follow me, you know very well that I'm not a fan of Google Photos for various reasons, but for something like that, it might actually be a solution that you send the photos that you've processed in your hub that are ready to share, you add them to cloud service like Google Photos and let the other people access them. Again, they're not going to access your hub, they're just looking at the gallery, so to speak. So I hope that answers part of the question. I don't want to go too much into technical details because that can become quite a bit complex, and it really depends a lot also how your whole photo management system is set up. Whether you're Mac, Windows, whether you use any photo management software, there is different options. For example, if you're a Lightroom, an Adobe Lightroom user, they have fabulous plugins that help you to make the sharing really, really easy. And a lot of it is happening automatically. So this is all possible, but it goes too deep for a Facebook Live. So, but I hope that gives you an idea that it can be done. And I would definitely go cloud. I wouldn't start copying them onto another drive and sharing that. This is only something I would do maybe after a scanning project, if you're the family photo keeper for the extended family, and others might be interested in these scans to share them. Of course, the cloud is one option, but also you could easily just copy them onto a USB or an external hard drive and give them the drive and say, okay, that's the family scans, go and do whatever you want to do with them, and they can't touch what you have. It's a copy then. But for within the family, for your everyday photos, I wouldn't do that. Then I would definitely go cloud. Now, let me just check. I think there was another question. I'll just check that quickly. Hold on. Here we go. Yes. When collecting photos from different family mobiles, all Samsung phones but different models, they have different photo names. For example, year, month, day, all without hyphens and dashes and whatnot, and another one has year, month, day as well, but they have dashes. So I have been trying to find a way to make the default photo name without the dashes, so that photos are filed chronologically. Yes, okay, so again, that's where the renaming comes in. First of all, it depends a bit. I'm suspecting, I don't know the exact setup, I'm suspecting that some might come in maybe through OneDrive, others possibly through Dropbox, because that's what then usually happens. They are being renamed automatically using the reverse date, which is a great feature, but as you say, you of course want them all to have the same format. Now, if you cannot change that in the app where it comes from, one option might be to all use the same app. So if they transfer to the computers through OneDrive, that all the other family members use OneDrive as well, then you automatically have the same format, or Dropbox or whatever it is. If that's not an option, you will have to rename them, which is not really a big deal once you're at it. So let's say you have you do a monthly maintenance session at your home and you add all the new photos. They go into, I call it the unsorted folder, where I gather everything. That's talking maintenance now. Unsorted folder. And from there, I cull, I rename, I adjust dates, whatever I need to do, add tags, and then I drag them and move them into the folder structure. So gather them first, and then it's really, really easy to use the program like the advanced renamer, because what you can then do, you can tell this program you can move these photos in there. It's only linking them, it's not making a copy. And then you can tell it remove all the dashes, or remove the first 2 or 3 dashes, because there might be other dashes that you want to keep. So either remove them, or if you want to add them, you do the opposite. So you can use these programs, and that's a great way to use them and to work in batches. And when you do that, and you do that monthly, you know, it's and once you know how the program works, of course, it's a matter of maybe 5 minutes to remove all these dashes and to have a file names that all look the same, so that they sort correctly. So I hope that helps. I'm just checking whether there was another question. I can't see one on the screen here, but sometimes they come through the phone. No, I think that's it for today. So again, we talked about how do iPhones work in connection with albums and the camera roll. We talked about redating and renaming files, and also about some of the sharing options. Without going into details, I might take that on board and talk a bit more about sharing options next time. Now, before I go, so I will put all these links of the software I mentioned in the comments. They're usually all listed on my resource pages anyway, so I might link to there. And I will also maybe put in a link for the Mac Photos users. That will be interesting. I'm just working and launching an online course, a do-it-yourself online course for Mac users only at this stage. So Windows users, hang in there. I'm developing another one for Windows users, which will basically just we will go together through the whole process. So it will go for 8 weeks in total, and we'll go through the whole process that I do when I do clean up photo collections for clients. So you get my whole VIP structure model, the exact same process, all the expert knowledge and tips. You get that. The only difference is you will have to do the work yourself, unfortunately, but I will guide you through that over the course of 8 weeks. So after 8 weeks, you'll have a clean, nice photo collection. That is what you wanted in your vision. That's where we start, of course, and you will end up with that clean collection. You will be able to find photos quickly. You will be able to do these wonderful photo books in like no time at all, and know everything you need to know how to move forward. So again, this is only for Mac Photos people at the moment, but for Windows it will be structured the exact same way, so you'll get the same results, of course. And you don't have to invest in any fancy software or anything. We will work with what you have. So I'll add that link too in the comments if you're interested. I'm still building it. There will be more information out soon about it, and on my website as well there is sort of a little summary page already. So if you want to check it out, please feel free to do so. If you have questions, just let me know. And if you're on my newsletter list, you'll know about it anyway, and you'll know as soon as more details are out. So I hope that helped, and thanks so much for being here today. And don't hesitate to send me a message if more questions come up. Otherwise, we'll see you in a month's time. See you. Bye.